This is Brian. I'm down at the packing bench. Today we're going to talk about sorting out and making decisions about clusters and bundles and groups of related items. Perhaps from a hobby or a craft, maybe dead stock from your back stock pile if you're an eBay or other reseller. But we're going to take a look at the process of going through a group of items and deciding how best to bundle them, sell them as singles, where to put them, what to do with them, how to sell them, whether to transport them, whether or not. And we're going to use some real life examples. Now this week, Rose has been clearing out her loft. It's where that Dritz dress form came from. And what she did as she's done that loft clear out is she actually set up a quick photo booth, a backdrop, to photograph items right up in the loft. Many of those items are going to end up in our next local auction, and they'll be local pickup for the most part. But as she sorts through each category, we've got to decide, do we sell it ourselves? Do we send it to a consignment auction? Do we put it up on Facebook? And often those same decisions that led to deciding to put the dress form on eBay will lead us down the path to decide how best to dispose of this surplus. Once you learn a process mentally and you absorb the concept that any item or any group of items that you no longer need can be sold, it can be passed on, to find a new home. Now that also includes stock you may have purchased thinking you were going to list it, but it just sits in your death pile. And for some reason or another, maybe it's size, maybe the value's changed, maybe you got it here and found out it was incomplete or needed something else to work and you don't want to invest the money in that. You've decided to surplus it. Well, the same process that you saw in the last video where Rose decided she was going through crafting supplies, she checked the comp, she said, that dress form has way too much value to just send to an auction where it may only sell for $5. They're selling for good money, and they're selling on eBay, and people are paying the shipping. That led to the video being about when to use flat rate and when to use calculated, but those concepts we went through apply to other categories. Well, she's up in her loft looking around. She realizes that her storage of craft supplies, larger ones, was getting a little out of control. So she decided to thin the herd. That produced boxes like sewing patterns. She also found a Dritz accessory for sewing. That item I'll show in a minute because I've got a packet to ship out today. It sold within days. Also vintage from the same era as the dress form. But she's basically making the lots that are up in the loft and she's arranging them into boxes and flats in the loft. That way the photos can be taken, brought down, and uploaded into the auction software, but the items don't have to be moved until the auction is over. Now, because she stores crafts in multiple areas, the bigger items up there in the loft, the smaller items, she uses the guest room double-wide closet. So because she has items in different areas, she went from the loft to cleaning out her craft area. Now, the craft area produced several flats to go to the local auction. You got acrylic paint and toll paint. You got glitter. Oh, I hate glitter. You got crafting supplies, jewelry making supplies, the wire and the pins and the pivots she uses to make some of her garden whimsies. So she's been thinning the herd in that closet as well. And I'll show you some of those lots because some of them we've already dropped off and they're currently up at auction. Because as we've aged, your hobbies change, your crafts change. In fact, she asked me while she was in the loft, she said, are you going to ever go back to making your own picture framing mats? I've got a couple of mat cutters stored up in there with the rest of her craft supplies. And I've got a whole big stack of the actual blank stock for mat cutting. I used to do this. I'll show you a couple of mine. Because the interesting thing about crafts and skills that you learn is that you can take them and you can think outside the box. While we were back in Michigan after her father passed, and we'd moved back to Michigan for a little while, one time on date night, she took me out to a place where they were teaching toll painting. Where usually toll is done on, it's done on wood blanks, but sometimes it's done on pottery, sometimes it's done on ceramics. But in my case, I practiced there, and then I came back and I decided to merge a little bit of what I'd learned as a toll painter, a professional, with the mat framing. So I'll show you some picture frame mats that are in the living room that actually combine the two skill sets. But I, like Rose and her sewing mannequin, I'm past the age where I wish to cut more mats for picture frames. It was a skill I learned, and if I were to do it again, I'd probably have to completely start over and relearn. But I got pretty fancy while I was doing it and engaged in it. Of course, at the smaller house, we've got less room on the walls to even hang art. So we're at that point where to hang something, something has to go away. And we like what we have hung on the walls. When we first started to downsize out at Seebeck, years ago now, we had to decide what to do with things like the boom truck, the lumber drop truck, it was a tilter, all the extra trailers, the tractors, the skid steers. So we had to go through a mental process with each of those and decide. Because the interesting thing is that equipment like that, and many other things, whether it be a shop router for routering woodwork or a Kubota tractor, they don't normally stand alone. When you decide to take on that equipment or that task or that hobby, it normally starts to build. With the shop router as an example, you've got router tables and router bits, you've got router guides, you've got books on routers. You end up with a collection of things that kind of circulate around that center object. With the skid steer, it was an old case skid steer, same story. If you want to transport, I had to buy a special trailer. It came with a bunch of accessories that I didn't need, like brush cutters. So it was parted out. I kept what I wanted from the group I bought. The rest was passed on. Now, when I went to pass on the skid steer, because we decided there was no real place for it here at the lake, I had service manuals. I had extra fuel containers. I had a few small parts that went with it. And I had to decide it. I had to look at it and I had to say, do I sell this as a bundle locally? Or do I take those items that have value and don't really belong to the skid steer, but they're kind of implements in general? And do I sell those separately? It'll raise the profit margin. The more you part the items out, the more you can likely get. When you sell a bundle, people don't value the parts of the bundle that they don't want or don't think they're going to need. So the Kubota went down to Brandy's farm. But there were still items that I got when I bought the Kubota that I never used. For instance, snow chains. We're not really in a climate to need snow chains. But I'd never taken the time to put the snow chains on. For the little bit of snow we got, the tractor did fine. Speaking of snow, the weather forecast for this morning was we were going to wake up to snow. Well, it warmed up a few degrees, so we got our snow in liquid form. But my point is if you're going to divest yourself of something like a table saw, then all those extra blades, those accessories, those guides, those books, you can sell the table saw locally and you can put the smalls up online. That was the way it was when I sold my Shopsmith, my woodworking tool, multifunction. I sold the items that came with the basic tool together. But the items I bought afterwards, the additional accessories, those I sold separately. I've actually still got a few in the bins I brought down from Seebeck, like all of the chisels. It was an unused set of chisels because I never used that tool to turn a lathe product. So I've got a full set of vintage Shopsmith lathe tools. Probably a good item for eBay. Definitely could be sold locally. And if I'd have sent them on with the tool itself when I sold the tool, which went to auction, there would have been little perceived value there. But they could bring me $50, $75, $100 if I separate them out. Once you bought a Shopsmith, you got a subscription to, I think it was called Shopmates. It was a magazine for woodworkers. Those were stored separately. So when I got to those, because they were in a different bins in a different location, I grouped them up into big flats and I sent those to a different auction. Now, when Rose decided to do the cull and get rid of the Dritz dress form and to get rid of the Dritz accessory, which sold within days, by the way, not the form, the accessory, she also took a look at the number of sewing machines she's accumulated over the years and all the accessories and all the thread and those things. So she did a cull on those as well. She gave me, I think it was 4 white spools of serger thread that had never been used. Good eBay item. Wouldn't add value to her sewing machine sale to speak of because the person buying it may not want white. And she went through all of her crafts that way, and she produced 6 lots of little crafts which can be grouped and sold separately at a local auction. They could also be sold in ours, but we're trying to limit how much of that we're holding over. We're doing the big items that we don't want to transport. She's taken the pictures where they are. She set up a quickie little photo backdrop up in the loft, and that way they don't even have to be brought down if they're going to be sold here on site by us in an auction, and then the buyers will come and collect those here. It cuts down on the transport. When we cleared Seebeck, the last house, I had all these stacks of lumber from running the sawmill. There was a stack of maple, there was a stack of madrona, there were several stacks of fir, and there were some specialty hardwoods. So those, we sold them by putting them up on Facebook ads, and we sold them by the species in the piles where they sat. And we told the people we sold them to when we ran the ad, you bring the labor to load them, you bring the trailer to haul them. We're not delivering, and you're not picking through it. You're going to get it all. Everything in the photo. One lot, one money. And that's the way we did that. And it worked very well. They cleared out all those large metal sheds. They look like carports. I have one here at the lake, and I had several back in the Seebeck place. When we were done emptying those carports, those lean-tos, we actually dismantled those. Some we sold, some we transported down to Brandy's farm, where they're being put in use down there. I actually ended up ordering a brand new one to be installed here at the lake because I needed a different size than I happen to have up in Seebeck. And I wanted it done quickly, and those crews can put those together in just a day. So when we took them apart, it took us a lot longer to transport them, and then to disassemble them, to transport them. I had to rent an extra long U-Haul because some of those were longer than my trailer could fit, and then we took them on out. The biggest one I actually sold, several $1,000s worth of sold, and that helped us cover our moving costs. It took an awful lot of fuel and an awful lot of time on the trucks and the trailers to make that many trips back and forth to Seebeck. But a lot of the surplus lumber, it went down to the farm for Brad's future projects. Brad is my son-in-law. Now, sorting lumber is very much like sorting sewing patterns, if you can believe that. Rose wasn't ready to get rid of all the patterns she'd accumulated over the years. So she worked up in the loft. She kept a few of her favorites, some that she thinks she still might want to try. And then she went through and all the open ones, all the open uncut ones, and a few of those that had actually been cut and used all went into one box, and they've gone to the local auction. They're up for sale, and she just told me they've already got a bid. So she'll move those along to somebody who wants to make their own clothes on or off a mannequin. So I'll show you the Dritz accessory that sold. It's going to be an over-length item, so I had to watch the shipping on that. It's from the same era as the dress form, same company as the dress form. And this one, you actually assemble it, and it's like an upright yardstick with a chalking mark that puts the mark on the hem of the skirt so that the person can then take the skirt off, either themselves or the mannequin, and then re-hem it. Because re-hemming and making alterations was something that Rose has been doing all her adult life. Now here is the Dritz chalk marker. Let me back up a second so you can see it's actually longer than the dress form is tall, once the dress form has its legs stored. But the whole idea here is that it sits in a base, it's like a yardstick, and it has a little chalk reservoir, and then it has a bulb, and the person, while they're wearing the dress, can actually turn, squeeze the bulb, and self-mark their own dress. No assistance. Bulb and hose permit self-marking. Mark your hemline accurately and quickly. Definitely an essential tool, and still sought after by those making alterations. This originally sold for $10.50. I'll have to actually look and see what Rose's listing brought. Didn't nearly have the value of the dress form, but then it really is just an accessory. And you can tell it's been moved many times over many years. But I'll have to wrap this in cardboard and probably have to pay a surcharge unless it goes FedEx. So we've been looking at what to do with bundles and clusters of items. Well, one of the items was that Dritz skirt marker. In the next video, I'm going to actually go into the packing in detail of that item and how surprising those extended surcharges for long items can be if you're using the post office. We'll do that, and we'll take a look at the other items that had to be packed that same day. This is Brian. We're at the lake, reselling in retirement.